What's going on, guys? For the point of this video is ideally to kind of explain a concept that it's not called this in the game, but I try to categorize things in my brain because it makes it easier to understand. Something that I kind of refer to as like a funnel in this game. So this is like just a notepad, like to just jot down a couple ideas to keep me on target or on task. But basically, these are the points that I'm going to go over today, and hopefully at the end of the video you'll understand kind of how to build any carrier ideally, but like I get a lot of build request videos, and I can't necessarily make all of them because I feel like people miss out on the point, and this is just like my thought process on it. Like I can make them, and I'll make more videos in the future that like, this is like a Hades build, but it's not the best Hades build. It's because there's a lot of different options, and as long as the carrier is suiting whatever, whatever you learn today in the video, it's gonna, be okay, and you're gonna figure out how to kind of actually like build it yourself. So the biggest issue that I see a lot of players struggle with when they're building their carriers or picking equipment, picking geniuses to go on it, or like, just chips and everything in general. People don't understand this concept of like how the game funnels damage or like categorizes damage into a couple things, and it's really, really important to understand. So like the first thing, like if you look at well, hopefully this is still open, but if it's not, yeah, okay, it's still open. So, oh no, it's not. While this loads back up, basically if you look at like a damage report on a fight, you can see a breakdown of what type of damage you actually took throughout the duration of that fight. So like if you took, for example, like if you took skill damage based on basic damage, it'll tell you the breakdown of how much of one versus how much of the other. And the game categorizes it into two damage categories, but there's more damage types in the game that's just funneled into one or the other. So if I'm going, like, you could even see in like pirate rally fights. So if I look at like the analysis here, right, like you can see if I look at like the damage breakdown, anything that's in red is basic damage. So I just refer to that as base damage. And anything in purple, which there isn't any here, but there are in like other fights typically if you're fighting against, maybe not pirates. Let's see if I have a replay of something. I probably don't. This is, well, actually, there might be some here. Yeah, perfect. So it'll categorize it with like skill damage, like what it was dealt damage-wise via skills versus what was dealt damage-wise with just actual like raw damage. And the reason why that's important to understand is because it helps you build, and the game categorizes everything into two damage funnels, and you can use that to build a carrier because you're defending against two different things. So back to the notepad here. The big thing is under base damage, there's a few things that are categorized in it. So raw damage, which if I go back to the game, hopefully it doesn't close on me. You can find like the raw damage from stuff. Well, let me try to just click out of these. Sorry, it's lagging. Like if I go to any plane, like this one, like this attack number here is raw damage. That's what I'm talking about. So like when the game is calculating damage for like say this slot, like this slot on the carrier on the far left here, if the game will take 1232 and multiply it by the quantity, right? Or it'll take the attack minus the enemy's armor, and then whatever the full value of that is, multiply it by the quantity, multiply by the range. And realistically, it's not multiplied by 8 for every slot. It's just saying 8 because it hits 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 slots. So it does one of those instances of damage to each slot. If, say, they don't have any warships left, it'll do 3 instances on this left one, 2 instances in the middle, and 3 instances of damage on the far one. So it'll like do a ton more damage. That's why like when you finish fights or when you get one extra hit, it hits time. It still does the multiplication, but it hits all of them in the same, in like 3, 2, and 3 in the back row on their carrier, and it does way more damage that way. But that's like what I mean by base damage. That is blocked or mitigated by overall armor, which you saw, like even if you click that that same math equation, right? It literally says it in there that it subtracts out armor, enemy's armor, right? So the raw damage is calculated Additional injury damage is calculated based on, like, if you use Jack Torpedo, and say like your total value additional injury damage at the end of a fight, say in a rally. Oh no, that's the wrong rally report. Sorry. Here. So like if I look at buff details, I go all the way down to additional injury, right? 11% over here. They got 67.5. So like the game will say you deal 100 damage, and this is just a number to keep math easy. So say that all the numbers came out to 100. It would deal an extra 11.91 damage in additional injury damage, which is added on top to the original 100 to get 111.91. And that would be what was shown in basic damage, if those were the only two damage types I did, right? I have A and B here because it just kind of, so devastating blow is just one way to maximize your additional injury percentage. So it'll drastically increase your additional injury percentage, and that is decreased by Last Stand, which is why the Apocalypse is so popular. But we'll go into that a little bit later in the video. Find Weakness is the skill on the Capricornus carrier. I've been testing it personally because I thought that it was going to be a really, really, really big deal. It is not. It does not do even close to the damage values that I was hoping that I would get from it. It's if you want to test it out yourself, and maybe I was wrong, go for it. But I did some pretty extensive testing. It does exactly what I thought it does, which is basically like if I have one debuff on someone, so and say you have 20% Find Weakness, if I hit them with Corrosion, I get a 20% bonus to my additional injury damage. So like my thought process was, well, if I stack 15 debuffs on someone, I'm going to be hitting as hard as like a base Agaris will, but I'll also have enough dodge. Similarly, I'll have dodge like a Nyx will. And it just does not calculate the same way. Like it does, but it like 200% additional injury damage or 300% is still nowhere near enough at top level to do what we need it to do. So unless they double the values or triple the values of Find Weakness, it's not going to be very, very popular. But that is what it does. So if you do need a couple 20%, 30% more, maybe you want to add that Genius in just to see if you can squeak out the win. Sometimes it might help, but it's going to be very niche. Devastating Blow also jacks up your additional injury damage. All of that is reduced by Last Stand. And then crit damage. So if that base damage that I was talking about on the plane is if you get a critical strike, you deal 2.5 times damage. If you have MacArthur on, you'll deal 3.5. If you have the JFK engine and MacArthur, or radar and MacArthur, you'll deal 4.5, so on and so forth. So like you'll do a lot more damage overall, but that all of this, everything in this top category here, calculates into base damage, or basic damage that you'll see in that battle report. The other purple number is skill damage that you'll see that is quite literally burn and biochemical missile. Repair is for some reason calculated with skill damage, but it's not actually, like, obviously you don't do damage with repair. I apologize if you can hear my cat. She is currently right on my leg. And I have Rainbow UAV, Crab Phalanx, and Apocalypse Carrier down there because those are literally, as far as I've read and I've seen, the only three things in the entire game that mitigate skill damage, which is why the Apocalypse is so widely used with top-level players. Because unless you purposefully use Rainbow UAV, which is severely limiting to the other options, for a big tanky carrier, or to eliminate someone who's using the new plane like the Heroic Star, or something like that with like Sky Split Seal with like massive biochemical missile damage and burn damage, the only thing that can resist that onslaught is an Apocalypse. Unless you're using like a souped up anniversary carrier, in which case the carrier resistance there will eliminate some of the effectiveness, but Sky Split Seal has such high percentages that it doesn't even matter. It's still going to annihilate that carrier, or that everything else. So the Apocalypse is really well used for that. The carrier, so knowing this, like all of that damage is funneled into one or the other, leads me to my next point. I have that list of carriers down there because, and this is a personal preference. Notice the Agaris isn't in there, the JFK. I am personally biased towards warship setups because I feel like they're just in general more fun to play. It's not haha speed wins, but they're a little bit more fun to play for me. So just for my play style, that list of 6 or 7 carriers or 7 are the only carriers that I would ever even consider building in this game. And that does not mean that the Zeus is bad. That does not. There are really, really strong carriers out there, and you could build them really well. I lose to the Agaris a lot. It's my personal preference, and the main reason is because these carriers all have at least one, if not more than, at least two, if not more than two, specialty defenses. Every top level carrier that is used by high level players in this game, all of them have multiple styles of defense and only one form of offense at most. So like Hades just has really high overall attack, but it has full warships defense, and it has now Wrath of Hades, which eliminates, it reduces additional injury damage, it reduces raw damage, it does not reduce skill damage, which is actually the way that you get around it. But it reduces all forms of, and it has Last Stand, so it gets overall armor, it gets Last Stand, and it gets carrier resistance to eliminate the effectiveness of some debuffs. So it mitigates this a little bit, but it's still not super, super effective against skill damage. And hint, hint, if you're trying to get around an Abyssal Hades, just use Phantom Phoenix or the new plane in first slot with Sky Split Seal in the second slot, and you'll kill them with an Agaris in the first round. They're not hard to get around. So all of these carriers, and like Imperial, right, has full warships defense, so it has which is calculated as overall armor, and it's got crit mitigation. So any one of these carriers has multiple different defense styles. I count dodge as a defensive style or a defensive skill in this equation. So like I don't ever add it up here, but I do calculate it as like that's how I classify it. The reason is it covers more options that way. You are better off in more situations the more different defenses that you have. So you don't leave yourself wide open to anything. It is just my personal preference and my play style. You can do the exact same thing as a counterpoint. If you wanted to play an aircraft setup and you use like a Helios, you could build a bunch of different equipment. You can have, a Jack torpedo focus. You can have, Helios with a Helios torpedo focus specifically to snipe dodge people. You could use the Agaris radar to increase your additional injury damage. Like you can use the exact same concept to have extra pieces of equipment in your arsenal to get around those matchups on the offensive side. I just like playing the defensive game. I play defense in sports. I enjoy defense more than I enjoy offense. So that's why these carriers are the only ones that I would really consider. And also, sorry, for Hades players, just use the Rainbow UAV and you eliminate a large part of that dying to skill damage problem. You still will get rocked by ridiculously high crit damage. So like if any of you players are using the JFK and you're going to get all mad at me because, hey, I have no problem with Hades, yeah, that's why. It doesn't reduce crit damage. So it reduces raw damage, which effectively will reduce the crit damage. But if someone has really high raw damage on a JFK, like way higher equipment, you're still going to explode a Hades in one round. But that's why. But the Hades, in my opinion, is still a better carrier. But anyway, this concept of funnels is not just in the damage portion. So and this is just how I categorize everything. Like I said again, you want an option to cover against each of these outcomes. You want an option to cover against each of these types of damage. Specifically with the skill damage. And the reason quick point. Focus fire and amplified violence are the way that you amplify skill damage. So for burn and biochemical missile can crit. Focus fire is the percentage that increases crit rate of skill damage, and the increase of damage from the crit is amplified violence. Both of those things, focus fire and amplified violence, also apply to repair. and that's why I have the asterisk here, because it doesn't do damage, but focus fire and amplified violence also help increase the crits of your repairs. So if you're using Tomcat, it's still beneficial to use Iron Wings, because the repair is going to be a lot higher, and you'll repair more warships. And for base damage, you got crit rate to increase the chance that you critically strike, or overall crit rate, and you got amplify crit damage, which will actually reduce crit mitigation down here. This concept of funnels is really, really, really big in this game in general, and this is for like all the specialty skills. Oh, I actually forgot one down here that I was supposed to put in. So like, you know, most people kind of at least have some understanding of how Nyx works with the deflector armor. So like it'll convert your overall armor and whichever is higher, your carrier armor or your warship armor, into dodge. So it funnels, in my head, it funnels defense into dodge. Agaris Radar funnels crit into devastating blow into additional injury damage. Attack gets funneled into accuracy via the Helios torpedo. Attack gets funneled into crit multiplier with the Death Carrier. And the last one here, which is another reason why the Apocalypse has been so popular with this specific build. If you look at, like, I don't know if any of you players follow like bigger players on other server blocks, but like I think he's in NFG. I don't know what his name is now, but he used to play under Love White. He uses an Apocalypse, and he uses this funnel to his advantage. Dodge funnels into what is it? Interception via the New Spring Radar. So just why this makes a lot of sense, and I'm just going to stop this video, will end after this point. Why this one is such a big deal is because, okay, well, the Apocalypse has overall blockade, right, in a high percentage, so you reduce the raw damage of someone else, which effectively reduces their crit damage, okay, because you're reducing the damage that it multiplies off of. It's based in Last Stand, so you reduce additional injury damage, okay, which is effective against both Find Weakness and Devastating Blow. And it has the Special Edition reduces Burn and Biochemical Missile by half of your Last Stand, which most high-level Apocalypse players are nearing 300 or nearing 400 Last Stand. So you're reducing the skill damage by virtually, I think the maximum reduction is 95%. So if you ever fight an Apocalypse and all of a sudden if you look at the replay and you're just seeing, you're hitting him, but it's dinking for like 10 damage, it's just that you're not meeting the right additional injury threshold. So like go down and look at your additional injury, and I promise you're at like negative 150 or more. And that's why you're not doing any damage. And not only that, but look at your overall attack. Your overall attack is way lower against an Apocalypse than anything else. And so, okay, it might be still weak against crit damage, but if you eliminate crit damage as an issue because it converts dodge into interception, and they probably also are using, or have high-level geniuses to have a ton of dodge on every carrier, it's going to really, really, really reduce someone's overall crit. So now it reduces the funnel. It messes with the funnel for Devastating Blow. If you're reducing their crit, now they can't get as much Devastating Blow. And if you're reducing their crit, they can't get much, or they don't get an issue. You don't run into an issue with crit mitigation because they won't crit you in the first place, right? And you already naturally cover overall, or you cover raw damage with blockade, you cover additional injury with Last Stand, and it has a natural immunity or high resistance to skill damage. That's why the Apocalypse is so strong right now. And you don't have to use the Rainbow UAV or the Crab Phalanx because it has it naturally. Whereas another carrier, if you're trying to block someone from using Burn and Biochemical Missile, you have to use Rainbow UAV or Crab Phalanx to stop it, or at least mitigate the damage if you're playing defensively. Or if you, like me, you just dodge it altogether. But anyway, I know that actually was way longer than I thought it was going to be, but anyway, I hope that video helped you guys. That's kind of how my brain processes all of this information. So if you're trying to build any carrier, look at its natural defenses and buy equipment or build equipment around those defenses. Okay? Hades has natural resistances to raw damage, has some natural resistance to additional injury. You might need a little help there with equipment. does not have necessarily a natural resistance to crit damage, and it doesn't have a natural resistance to skill damage, but it has a good amount for raw damage and additional injury. You just might need a little help on the additional injury side. So your equipment should reflect that. Your equipment should take care of the crit mitigation, so like an Imperial Phalanx is a great thing to add onto there. You can use the Rainbow UAV to mitigate skill damage. So you're covering all of your bases. That's how you build a carrier and don't have to keep asking people questions on what to build. Go through the handbook, see what stats every piece of equipment offers, and try to piecemeal your own thing together just based on that information. But anyway, I hope that helped, guys. A lot of people have been asking me how this stuff works, so hopefully that helps you guys. Have a good one.